At 12:50 p.m., on June 8, 1924, Noel Odell saw George Mallory and Andrew Irvine moving high on Everest's northeast ridge before clouds swallowed them. That sighting is the first hard clue. The two climbers were trying to reach the summit nearly 29 years before Hillary and Tenzing's confirmed ascent in 1953. They were using 1920s clothing, primitive oxygen sets, and a route guarded by steep rock steps near the top of the world. The mystery is not whether they disappeared. They did. The mystery is whether they reached the summit before they died. To answer that, we need a timeline. Odell's sighting. The second step problem, Mallory's body in 1999. Irvine's partial remains reported in 2024, and the missing camera that may still hold the only photograph that could settle the case. Confirmed, the 1924 British Everest expedition was attempting the first ascent of the mountain from the Tibetan north side route. This was not modern Everest. There were no fixed ladders over every obstacle, no modern down suits, no satellite weather forecast, no rescue helicopter waiting above base camp. The climbers were working with wool, hobnails, early oxygen equipment, maps, judgment, and nerve. That matters because every summit theory has to pass through equipment and time. Could Mallory and Irvine climb high enough, fast enough, and then still descend safely in the late day? The question is not romance. It is logistics at extreme altitude. Confirmed, George Mallory was the experienced climber, already famous for his Everest attempts. Andrew "Sandy" Irvine was younger, strong, mechanically talented, and valuable because he understood oxygen equipment. Together they formed a risky but logical team. Mallory brought route judgment and climbing experience. Irvine brought youth, endurance, and technical skill with the breathing sets. That partnership also created the central uncertainty. If the oxygen failed, Irvine's role mattered. If the route forced difficult rock climbing, Mallory's skill mattered. If one fell, the rope between them mattered. The evidence later found on the mountain suggests a roped fall occurred, but it does not tell us whether that fall happened before or after the summit. Confirmed, Mallory and Irvine set out from high camp for a summit attempt on June 8. They were already above the altitude where every decision becomes slower and more expensive. Oxygen was limited. Weather could close without warning. A late schedule could turn success into a trap. Odell later found their high camp in disorder, which may mean haste, exhaustion, or simply the normal chaos of a high-altitude departure. The key question is timing. If Odell saw them near the second step at 12:50 p.m., they may have been dangerously late. If he saw them higher, near the third step or final pyramid, the summit possibility becomes more tempting. The mystery lives inside that ambiguity. Confirmed, Noel Odell reported seeing the two climbers moving on the ridge when clouds briefly cleared. Disputed, exactly where they were. This is the hinge of the case. If the figures were at or near the first step, they were likely too low and too late to summit. If they were at the second step, they faced one of the hardest obstacles on the route with 1924 gear. If they were beyond it, the summit becomes more plausible. Odell's reports changed in wording over time, and the mountain itself can distort scale. One tiny sighting through cloud became a century of argument, because those few seconds decide whether the story is failed attempt or possible first ascent. Confirmed, the northeast ridge includes rock steps, and the second step became the most famous obstacle in the Mallory and Irvine debate. Modern climbers know the route with ladders, fixed ropes, and accumulated knowledge. Mallory and Irvine did not have that world. Interpretive, if they had to climb the second step directly in 1924 conditions, the difficulty becomes a serious argument against a successful summit. But difficulty is not impossibility. Mallory was a talented rock climber. Some later climbers argued he might have found a way. Others believe the obstacle, altitude, clothing, boots, and oxygen limits make success unlikely. That is why this is a disputed climbing question, not a solved one. Confirmed, oxygen equipment was part of Mallory and Irvine's final attempt, and Irvine's mechanical skill was one reason he was chosen. But 1924 oxygen was not modern oxygen. The sets were heavy, awkward, and failure-prone compared with later systems. At extreme altitude, even small equipment problems could slow movement, cloud judgment, and turn a late summit push into a deadly descent. Time matters just as much. If the pair were still below major obstacles at 12:50 p.m., then daylight, weather, fatigue, and oxygen supply all count against a safe summit and return. Interpretive. The case is not only about whether they could climb up, it is about whether they could climb up, prove it, and still get back down. Confirmed. Clouds and poor visibility shaped the final day. Odell saw the climbers only because the cloud briefly opened. Later, weather closed in again. That matters because the mountain can hide both success and failure. If Mallory and Irvine reached the summit, clouds may have erased all witnesses. If they turned back below it, clouds may have protected the legend from a clearer defeat. If they fell during descent, weather may have delayed or prevented any rescue. Everest did not need a dramatic storm to become lethal. At that altitude, a cloud break can create history, and the next cloud can erase it. Confirmed. On May 1, 1999, the Mallory and Irvine research expedition found George Mallory's body high on Everest's north side. The discovery changed the case. Mallory still had personal effects. A rope injury suggested a serious fall while roped. His body position and injuries implied he did not simply vanish into legend. He died on the mountain after a violent accident. But the discovery did not answer the summit question. The camera was not found. A photograph of his wife Ruth, which he reportedly intended to leave on the summit, was also not found on him. Those missing items became clues, but not proof. Confirmed. Irvine has long been linked to a missing camera that might have recorded summit evidence if the pair reached the top. That is why searchers cared so deeply about finding Irvine. If the camera survived, and if film could be recovered, and if it contained a summit image, the Everest first ascent timeline could change. But each "if" is doing heavy work. High altitude, ice, time, impact, and decay could destroy evidence. The camera may not have been with Irvine. It may have been lost in the fall. It may never be found. The camera is the perfect mystery object, specific enough to chase, uncertain enough to haunt every search. Confirmed by major reporting in 2024, a National Geographic team reported finding partial remains believed to be Andrew Sandy Irvine, including a boot and a sock marked with his name. This was emotionally significant after a century of uncertainty. But it still did not settle the summit question. The reported find was far below where Mallory's body was found, on the Rongbuk Glacier area, likely moved by time, ice, and gravity. It may help narrow search thinking. It may eventually connect to DNA confirmation and new clues. But the camera remains missing. So the 2024 discovery adds a major evidence card, not the final verdict. Reported. The 2024 Irvine clue may help searchers think about movement, glacier transport, and where related objects could have gone. But a boot or partial remains far below the ridge cannot alone prove a summit. The mountain moves evidence. Ice carries evidence. Falls scatter evidence. A body part can travel far from the place where the fatal accident happened. That is why the camera still matters. The discovery narrows the human story, but not the summit history. It says Irvine was not only a name in a file, it places a physical clue back into the evidence map. What it does not do is show whether Mallory and Irvine stood on top of Everest. So what is the responsible answer? Confirmed, Mallory and Irvine disappeared on June 8, 1924. Confirmed, Odell saw them high on the ridge at 12:50 p.m. Confirmed, Mallory's body was found in 1999. Confirmed, reported Irvine evidence emerged in 2024. Confirmed, no summit photograph has been recovered. Likely, they died in a fall or exposure event high on the north side. Disputed, whether that happened before or after reaching the summit. Unresolved, the camera, the exact location of the fall, and the final sequence of movement. The strongest honest answer is not yes or no. It is this: the evidence keeps the summit possible but not proven. Mallory and Irvine are not just an Everest legend. They are a lesson in how one cloud break, one missing camera, and one body found 75 years later can keep history open. If you were building the next evidence search, would you focus on the camera, Irvine's remaining route, or Odell's sighting line? Tell us which clue could finally settle the first ascent question, and follow the Mystery Atlas TV for evidence timelines where the myth is only the doorway.